All right, so notes for 5.2. We are still solving, so completing the square is another method to solve a quadratic. And when we get into Unit 6, we have to use this method of completing the square to move our equation into vertex form. Now, we're not going to do anything with graphing right now in Unit 5, but when we get into Unit 6, you have to do this. So depending on the numbers that you have here in your equation, sometimes using the quadratic formula, always actually factor first. If it factors, you always want to factor. If it doesn't factor, then you want to use a quadratic formula. This is a more complicated way to solve it, completing the square. That's the method that we're going to do right now. But like I said, you're going to have to use it when we get into Chapter 6. So don't think that you can blow it off right now, okay? So step 1, just like using the quadratic formulas, you've got to look and see what form you're in. And right now we're in ax squared plus bx plus c. So right now this is in standard form. And when we complete the square, we're going to rewrite it and move the constant to the other side. Now, we did this when we did our square root method in Unit 1. The difference is we have this x term. So we can't solve this by square root because we have this x, but that's what we want to do. We want to move the constant to the other side. So I would add 34 to both sides, and it looks like this. Now, my a term here is 1, so this next step says divide both sides by a, but because this is 1, for this problem, I can skip this, all right? So the next step, take half of b, square it, and add it to both sides of the equation. Okay, so here's where it gets a little tricky. So here's my b term. So if I take 8 and I take half of it, I'm dividing by 2. That's what this means. Take half of it means divide by 2. And what this gives me is 4, square it, so 4 squared equals 16. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this. And if I rewrite this, this is x squared plus 8x plus 16. So I took this 16 and I added it over here. And now I'm going to also add it to the other side of my equation. So I took this 8x, I'm adding 16 to this side. I have 34, I add 16 to this side. Now, the reason why I kept this 4 right here and didn't just write a 16 is because now I'm going to change this side of the equation. So this side of the equation now becomes x plus 4 squared equals 34 plus 16, which is 50. Now, what you're going to see a lot of times, I'll write this as just 4 squared, and I'll completely skip this step, and I'll go straight to this. Because if we know that this value is 4, then this value is 4. Now, the thing that's important is because this is a positive number, this is addition. If this was minus 8x, this would be a negative 4 that's right here. Okay, so now what we have is we have a perfect square on this side because the whole thing is squared, and we have a 50 on this side. So my next step would be to take the square root of this side and the square root here, and I get x plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 50. Okay, so I know that 50 has a perfect square, 25 and 2. So I can simplify this side, and I can say plus or minus 5 square root of 2. Now on the other side, I still have x plus 4. Okay, so I stopped using this up here, but basically it says factor the perfect square trinomial. This was when I factored it. I went from this step to this step. So when I said I pull out just the 4, I'm kind of shortcutting that when I write it this way. Take the square root of both sides. So that's what we did, square root of both sides. Solve both cases. So now what this means is I'm going to move this 4 over because my answer needs to be x equals negative 4 plus or minus 5 square root of 2. And this is my final answer. Now, if you think about this, right, we're kind of modeling this method of our quadratic formula. So negative b plus or minus the square root. And so if we were to go and solve this with the quadratic formula, you'd end up with exactly the same answer. Okay? All right, let's do another one. All right, so step one, I don't have an a value, so I want to move this constant to the other side. So I end up with x squared minus 18x equals negative 56. Now I take my b value, I'm going to cut it in half. So this becomes 9 squared, which is 81. All right, so I know 9 is the value that I'm going to look for. So I'm going to have x minus 9 squared. All right, let's go back up here. So here I took the 16 and I wrote it all the way out, and then I had to factor it, and I end up with this factor. But remember I said you can take the 4 and shortcut it. That's what I did here. I took the 9 and I shortcutted it here. The reason this is negative is because this is negative, so that's negative. Now on the other side, we're going to have negative 56, but now I have to add this 81 because we add the 81 to both sides. Here I added it as a 9. On this side I added it as 81. So x minus 9 squared equals, I don't know what that is, 81 minus 56, 25. Oh, this is a good one. So now I take the square root of both sides, and I have x minus 9 equals plus or minus 5. Bring the 9 over. Now, this I can solve. So I'm not going to stop here, because what this is saying is it's saying x equals 9 plus 5 and x equals 9 minus 5. So this plus or minus 5 means I'm going to have one answer where I'm adding 5 and one answer where I'm subtracting 5. So here my solutions are going to be 14 and 4. So x equals 14 and 4. We can leave it like this, but technically we want to put it in braces that identifies that as two different integers. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and I'm going to let you try this one. This is already in the form that we want, so you don't have to move anything. Actually, you know what? Never mind. I take that back, because this is a little different. I have this 2 here. So I'm going to divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. So now this gives me x squared minus 8x equals negative 15. So if you look up here, step 2, divide both sides by a to create this coefficient of 1 on my x squared term. So that's what I just did. All right, so I divide everything, all the terms, by 2. And sometimes when you divide by whatever this coefficient is, sometimes you don't get a nice whole number. Sometimes you end up with a fraction. Okay, I'm going to pause the video because now this is in a form that you can solve based on what we've done so far today. So go ahead and solve this. I'll do all the steps and then come back and check. All right, here's what we have. Middle term, cut it in half, square it. 4 goes to this side, has to be negative because this is negative. Add 16, which is a positive 1. So when I move that over, I get 4 plus or minus 1. I can keep doing the math on this. So 4 plus 1 is 5, and 4 minus 1 is 3. Okay, let's flip it over. Let's see here. We'll go ahead and do this one because this one turns out to be a fraction, so it's a little bit more funky. All right, so step 1, we've already moved this over. So what I want to do is divide this by 4, and divide this by 4, and divide this by 4. So when I do that, I get x squared minus 2x equals negative 3/4. It's okay. We can do it. We can do a fraction. We can do a fraction. So I take 2, divide it by 2, and this becomes 1. And 1 squared is still 1. So on the left side, I end up with x minus 1 squared. Okay, so this is negative. So this is negative. This value of 1 comes here, and this is going to equal negative 3/4 plus 1. All right, so when I simplify and do the math here, 3/4 plus 1 is going to be a positive 1/4. Okay, so next step, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. We've done this before. This is the same as saying the square root of 1 over the square root of 4. Square root of 1 is 1, and the square root of 4 is 2. So what we end up with here is x minus 1 equals 1/2. Hold on, plus or minus 1/2, because I took the square root. So when I move that over, I get 1 plus or minus 1/2. Now, while this is a fraction, this is an easy fraction. You can solve this. So what we end up with is x equals 1 and 1/2, because we're adding 1/2 to 1. So 1 and 1/2 is the same as 3 over 2. And if I have 1 minus 1/2, it's 1/2. So those are my two answers. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this one, and if you want to, go ahead and try it, and then you can turn the video back on. I'll go ahead and talk through it because we're going to end up with a bunch of fractions on this. So first thing, I'm going to move that over. I'm going to divide everything by 3. So when I do this, I have x squared plus 10 over 3x equals negative 8 over 3. All right, so now remember the goal here. I have 10 over 3. The goal is to take half of this. So if I take half of this, this is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. So this becomes 10 over 6. And I'm going to go ahead and simplify this to 5 over 3. And 5 over 3 squared is the same as 25 over 9. So let me go through this again. So 10/3 is what my b value is. I'm going to take half of it. So if I multiply this across, I get 10 and 6 on the bottom. So I could leave it like this, but I just want to reduce it so I have smaller numbers. So if I divide the top and the bottom by 2, I get 5 over 3. Now that's what goes on this side. So I have x plus 5 over 3 squared. Now I know it's addition because this is addition. All right? Now when I square it, this is what goes on the left side. So I have negative 8 over 3 plus 25 over 9. Now I want to simplify this, and so I have to have a common denominator because I'm adding or actually subtracting fractions. So if I multiply the top by 3 and the bottom by 3, I get 24 over 9. So this whole thing reduces to 1 over 9. Because I have 25 minus 24, which is 1, and the denominator stays the same. Okay, so now I'm going to take the square root of this side and the square root of this side, and I get x plus 5 over 3 equals 1 over 3. Remember, this is the square root of 1 over the square root of 9. Oh, I keep doing that today, so it's plus or minus. So when I move it over, I have negative 5/3 plus or minus 1/3. So if I add, I'm going to get x equals negative 4 over 3. And if I subtract this, I would get negative 6 over 3, which is the same thing as negative 2. So those are my two answers, negative 2 and negative 4/3. Okay. That one is much harder because we've got all those fractions in there. Okay, so this part, as we get into the last two questions today, it talks about solving irrational functions. So irrational functions, this tells you you're going to have a square root in your answer. So everything that we've had so far, we've been able to take the square of everything. Even on this side, we could take the square root of 1. We could take the square root of 25. When we see this irrational function, we're going to end up with a square root in our answer. Okay, so we're going to start this exactly the same way. So I have x squared plus 16x. I'm going to add the 21 to both sides. So this is going to be plus 16. Okay, this value of a is 1, so I don't have to do anything. I just take the middle term, divide it by 2, and this is going to give me 8 squared, which is 64. So on the left side, I end up with x plus 8 squared. And this is going to be 16, so this is where the 8 comes from, and the 64 goes on this side. So when I simplify, I have 80. 64 plus 16 is 80. Okay, so now I can take the square root of both sides, and I get x plus 8 equals plus or minus the square root of 80. Now, 80 is a number that I know I can simplify. I just know this one, but it's 16 and 5. 16 is my perfect square, so 16 times 5 is 80. You might need to play around with it a little bit on your calculator with dividing out your perfect squares. So what happens is I end up with x plus 8 equals plus or minus 4 square root of 5. Now, remember I said it's irrational. We're going to have a square root in the answer. So we have this. So when I move the 8 over, I can't combine anything because they're not like terms. So this is my final answer. I'm done. All right. Go ahead and try number 2. I'm going to pause this and then come back and check your answer. Remember, you've got this coefficient of 3, so you need to take care of that first. Okay, here's all the work on this. So go ahead and pause the video so that you can work through this if you didn't get the final answer. All right, that's it.